Hi, everyone. Democrats are still reeling from the soft blowout loss to Donald Trump. They lost the Electoral College as well as the popular vote. Republicans have taken a majority in the Senate. Looks like they're also going to take one in the House. And yesterday we looked at several reactions from leftists to the election results, and a lot of them had unhinged meltdowns. The kind of things that most reasonable, moderate people who have any shred of self-control would not post online. You couldn't pay people to post that kind of stuff online. But people are willingly posting this because that sort of performative meltdown ends up giving you some sort of social attention, which is what a lot of these people want. They just want attention at the end of the day, which is, funny enough, what we're also starting to see in the leftist entertainer class. There have been a lot of meltdowns on television, particularly many of them on ABC. And we're going to start out by looking at a comedian, Jimmy Kimmel.
It was a terrible night last night. It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go, for healthcare, for our climate, for science, for journalism, for justice, for free speech. It was a terrible night for poor people, for the middle class, for seniors who rely on Social Security, for our allies in Ukraine, for NATO, for the truth and democracy and decency. And it was a terrible night for everyone who voted against him. And guess what? It was a bad night for everyone who voted for him, too. You just don't realize it yet.
There's just so much there to unpack. First off, it's kind of ironic that somebody who purports themselves to be very clearly a Democrat on a very Democrat-leaning, very far left-leaning news channel, ABC. If you remember, ABC is where Trump and Kamala had the debate, and only Trump got fact-checked by both of the hack anchors that were sitting there. Kamala spewed several lies, not once. Okay, it was like he was debating three people at the same time. Anyway, it's very interesting that Jimmy Kimmel, this Democrat, is out here talking about democracy when his own party uninstalled the duly elected by registered Democrats presidential candidate Joe Biden, who gained 8 million votes throughout the primaries, to install this person, Kamala Harris, who was deeply unpopular in her own party. In fact, when she ran in 2020, she was the first person to drop out. She got absolutely obliterated by Tulsi Gabbard. And yet here we are having Jimmy Kimmel, who's supposed to be telling jokes, crying on camera, telling us about how awful the country's going to be. It can't get any more awful than what Joe and Kamala did. In fact, it's only gotten better because, hey, this guy's talking about Ukraine. Let's see what's been happening over there in the Ukraine ever since Trump got elected and has literally not even stepped into the Oval Office yet.
As for Ukraine, we value the willingness of all our BRICS partners to make sure that this situation is resolved peacefully as quickly as possible. Russia is open to talks, to negotiations, like we spoke from the very start.
Wait a minute. I thought the whole world was going to fall apart the moment that Donald Trump got into office. Are you telling me that Jimmy Kimmel was wrong, that this man hasn't even gotten into office and Putin's already like, hey, let's end this war? I'm going to step out. You caught me with a hand in the cookie jar. I'm okay. I'll just go back to minding my own business and we'll just be homies. Why don't you just come through for a golden shower? By the way, that's not real. That didn't happen. It's off the Steele dossier, but it's funny. You can make jokes from both sides. Anyway, since we're checking on the Ukraine conflict, let's see what's going on with Hamas and Israel. Hamas calls for immediate end to war after Trump election win. Well. If it isn't the world peace that was promised to us when we voted for this man, I can't believe it. Hopefully this conflict ends sooner than later and we can all go back to thinking that Hamas is just a chickpea dip. Anyway, now that we checked these two conflicts, let's see what's going on in New York. I'm curious. They have been overrun with illegal immigrants. They've been using hotels to house them. The city has been spending exorbitant amount of money. In fact, at one point, they even had to close down schools so they could house extra illegal immigrants because they didn't have enough rooms in the Roosevelt where they were housing illegals and other places to, accommodate as many people as were coming to New York, which some estimate were about 250,000 in just a few months.
The city will no longer issue vouchers to migrants to pay for food, ending a controversial program that had repeatedly come under attack by conservatives and others.
This pilot program in New York City, drenched in both humanity and controversy, distributed debit cards to migrant families staying in city-funded hotels and allowing them to buy their own food. Eyewitness News reporter Josh Einiger following the breaking news for us. Josh?
Well, Bill, it's a program that, as you say, generated plenty of controversy, but now its absence may raise even more questions. The so-called Immediate Response Cards pilot program was designed to help feed migrant families who'd found themselves in New York with no way to afford food. The one-year contract provided what the city described as culturally relevant food to 2,600 migrant families, allowing them to basically buy what they wanted. A family of four with two kids under 5 got about $350 per week to cover food in a program the city said would actually save taxpayers millions a year. It also reduced food waste. You may remember the food the city had been providing in migrant shelters was seen as not culturally sensitive to the needs of some migrant groups, and it ended up just going to waste. For more than a year, the city was groaning under the weight of more than 200,000 asylum seekers. Officials say the migrant population has actually reduced lately. In fact, a massive shelter on Roosevelt Island is in the process of closing. In the meantime, Mayor Adams spoke on the phone yesterday with President-elect Donald Trump, who had vowed during his campaign to mass deport migrants. Aside from congratulating him on his win, though, Adams today would not say what they discussed.
Wow, that's absolutely insane. I didn't even know the extent of this. I'm listening to all this, and I'm just like baffled. The way that the American government treats its own people and puts people who have entered the country illegally, breaking the law essentially, and have so far contributed nothing to our economy, haven't paid anything in taxes, and get here, they get a hotel to stay at, the Roosevelt. I've been to the Roosevelt. It's a great hotel. It's on 53rd Street. It's about 6 blocks away from Central Park. It's beautiful hotel, historic hotel. They're just housing people there, staying for free, and they're giving them cards, debit cards, with $1,400, $350 a week, folks. $1,400. When I was living in New York, my first salary working as a videographer and editor, I was getting paid $1,100 a month, and I was still on food stamps. I had to work every single day, 8 to 10 hours a day, so I could make that money at the end of the month and pay for my studio apartment on 42nd Street and 8th Avenue. And it's just crazy to me that New York has a homelessness problem. New York has an entire population. There are people who live in micro apartments that are often smaller than this bedroom that I'm filming this in, have shared bathrooms. At one point, I looked into living in one of those. It's like living in a dorm, except you're like 35 and you work a job all day and you can't really start a family in that. It's not really conducive. It's the only kind of thing that can exist in New York where people are willing to live in standard places, situations, so that they can make it in the city, which is damn near impossible nowadays, not only with skyrocketing prices, but also because you have to be really good at networking to be able to make it in a place like that. All that being said, we have an entire population of people, over 200,000, like you heard, coming and just being given all of these benefits while New Yorkers themselves are paying taxes through the fucking nose so they can support this population. I understand having empathy and everything. I understand wanting to take care of your neighbor. As a Christian, that is a Christian value, right? You want to take care of your community. You want to make sure that you're uplifting everybody along with yourself. But at the end of the day, if it's coming at the detriment of your community, you're not doing something right? Like, for example, if you're sitting in an airplane and the airplane's going down, what do they tell you to do? They tell you to put the mask on yourself and then on the person who's traveling with you, if that's a child, right? You don't mask up the child and then yourself, because if something happens to you, then you can't take care of that child. So it's like you have to take care of yourself first, right? So that you can make yourself available and be able to take care of the people around you. If you're literally putting your citizens last, who are busting their ass to pay taxes in your state and in your city, you're saying that you don't value them as citizens, as people who are taking part in your state and your city. To me, that's a huge slap in the face. It's dishonorable. You're betraying your constituents. So good on Mayor Adams for ending this. They couldn't confirm whether or not Donald Trump had anything to do with the situation. I like to believe and speculate that perhaps he did. It's not a coincidence that this man gets in office and then all of these things all of a sudden start turning around for the reasonable, common sense thing. And I'm not saying let's not have immigrants come into this country. All I'm saying is let's have people enter here legally, and let's not set up a system where people are incentivized to usurp public resources at the cost of the people who have been living here for generations and paying to be here and having to put up with all of the taxes, all of the needless bureaucracy that you have in states like New York and California, all of the bullshit that you have to deal with as an American to live in this great country. It is a great country, but you know, if we're going to put other people who just got here, who just made their way through the door without going through the appropriate process, and we're going to put them all the way ahead in the line and give them everything so they can succeed, we're essentially creating a system that rewards criminality. Anyway, folks, I know we took a long walk to get to this point, but all that to say, Jimmy Kimmel's a hack. He doesn't represent anybody but corporate elites, the Hollywood elite, and that's what he's doing. At the end of the day, he's crying because his party lost. And he's not going to have the benefits of having the inside line into the executive power at the White House. That's really what it all comes down to. All these people, all these celebrities who are endorsing Kamala Harris, everybody who is coming out of the woodwork, who are part of the Hollywood as well as the DC establishment, and we're just backing her massively. Their interest is just securing power for themselves. So screw all these people. They don't represent you. They just have a populist message, and they try to frame it in the most artificial, least authentic way possible. And most people, I would say the vast majority of them, have caught on to this game, and they're not buying it anymore. Anyway, on to the ladies of The View, also on ABC. No coincidence there, obviously. The ladies of The View have been melting down ever since Election Day, so you can only anticipate how crazy they're going to go this time around.
She made the most important statements that when we lose, we accept the results and we peacefully transfer power, because for some reason people forgot what that looked like. So that's what it looks like. And I'm hoping now we can get rid of election denying, because you can't what about this election, but what about that time you guys lost? Election denying has not been popular. The only person to pull it off is Donald Trump. Every other person he endorsed that was an election denier lost their races. So people need to stop doing that. This is over. You had your moment. It was super cool for a second. Now it's not. Bye. Like, that's all.
Democrats have also denied elections. In fact, you go back to Al Gore, that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and then it got kicked back to the state court, if I remember this properly. And then for years, they were complaining about how Bush has stolen the election. There are even movies that delve into conspiracies about how Bush conspired with the attorney general in Florida and the Florida government so that he could have the election handed over to him. Democrats love doing this. They love framing all the malaise is just on the other side. They're morally perfect. They don't do anything bad ever. They're the ones who are saintly and have been anointed by God to save this country. And you know what? There's corruption on every side of politics. There's some of it on both parties. However, in my life experience, I've learned to have heavy distrust for the people who present themselves as with this pristine patina of perfection. That doesn't exist, especially in the game of politics. Everybody's out for themselves. They're all self-serving. They don't give a fuck about the American people. In fact, a large portion of them have absolute disdain for the American people. And you can hear this in the way that the ladies of The View talk about the American public and how many of them call, especially Latino voters who came out in force, in mass for Donald Trump, call them racist and misogynist. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself right here.
Today I don't feel, yesterday I felt better. Maybe it was the Valium. But today I feel like we lost the Senate, the Supreme Court, the executive branch. The House is on the verge of going to him. It's pathetic. There are no checks and balances. A completely intelligent, qualified woman lost to a guy who's simulating sex with a microphone. I mean, come on, America.
Yeah.
I know.
First off, she was not qualified. She wasn't even elected to be the candidate. It's crazy to me how they just ignore that fact. She was the least qualified, not just because she's a bad politician, she's not authentic. We don't know any of her policies or what she stands for. 2 years ago, she was saying she was against fracking. She wanted gun buybacks. And then all of a sudden, I'm a gun owner. Yes, let's drill, baby, drill. They will just pretend like we have collective amnesia and they can just say whatever the fuck they want and that'll stick. It's not going to happen anymore. Things are going to get fact-checked in real time. These lies and hoaxes and the propping up of this Manchurian candidate, how everybody hated Kamala Harris, and then all of a sudden everybody got behind the Kamala train. As soon as she became the candidate and Joe Biden stepped down, we all saw it. We all saw how absolutely untrustworthy the Democrat Party is. So you literally dug your own graves, put yourselves in it, and then bury yourselves. That's it. You can only blame yourselves for all this.
I feel that I was saddened when I saw her, primarily because this is the kind of leadership we could have had. Yeah. And that's what I felt.
I'm going to stop her right there. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I wanted to let it play a little more, but I hate this idea that Kamala Harris represents any sort of leadership. She doesn't. She's not a leader. The one time she ran on a primary, she got ejected first round. She got pummeled, destroyed. There are reports that when she was being briefed on intelligence, that she got concerned about the language that was being used in the reports. Instead of looking at what our enemies are doing, she was worried about the language being gendered. Is this truly the kind of leadership that we want there? Like, you're making an analysis. You're supposed to be there making an analysis of the dangers that the country's facing, and you're worried about the fucking pronouns and the verbs being used. Jeez, man, go be an English teacher. Go work in a high school. Like, America needs true leadership, especially nowadays with so many countries having nuclear weapons and, you know, the risk of going into nuclear war being at the tip of a finger. You can snap your fingers and boom, we're there. If there is the will to do it, or if there's weakness in leadership to an extent that somebody feels like they can just get away with it.
That's what I felt walking away from it. Like, this country missed out on that type of leadership. This country missed out on the leadership of moving forward, not going back. The leadership of someone that was trying to unify this country in a way that I think this country really needs, and it's just going to become more divisive under someone like Donald Trump.
What are you talking about? She was going to unify the country. She did as much as anybody else to divide it. She was using her bully pulpit during the rallies to literally spew lies about Trump's intentions in office. She was saying that he wants a national abortion ban, being the fact that he's already said he will never sign a national abortion ban. Plus, that would never even pass both houses of Congress and make it to his desk if there were any push to get it to that. I mean, how is that unifying the country? Plus, you just take an objective look at Trump and his allies, and then Kamala and her allies. Who came out in support of Kamala? All of these Diddy Party attendees, Hollywood elites. Every single one of them. You got the J-Los of the world. You got the Marvel characters of the world. Like, every single person, every single actor, the most woke actors, people that you would likely not trust with taking care of your dog. And who came out in support of Trump? You got RFK, former Democrat, Tulsi Gabbard, former Democrat, Vivek Ramaswamy, one of the most intelligent, business-minded politicians on the right, ran for president. You got J.D. Vance, also, dude is brilliant. They were calling him weird. You just watch one of his interviews. The dude is so smart. Every single time he was having an adversarial interview, just nuked the person he was talking to. Who else we got? Elon Musk, likely the Thomas Edison of our generation, one of the most innovative entrepreneurs in the world right now. I mean, you just compare the teams. Who's surrounded by people who come from all sorts of backgrounds, who come from the Democratic Party, like RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, even Elon Musk. And then you have the Democrats who just trot out every single celebrity they can, and we're basically baiting people to come watch glorified concerts with Katy Perry, Beyonce, and like every other musician they could trot out or shell out the money for, which, by the way, they must have spent a lot of money on appearances by these celebrities, because the report came out yesterday that Kamala raised over $1 billion for her campaign. And in the course of 107 days, I think that's how long her campaign ran, her campaign not only spent over $1 billion, but it ended $20 million in debt. Wow, where did all that money go? And you're telling me that you would be good managing this economy? You can't manage $1 billion in 100 and something days? Wow, truly. Mwah.
While I think she certainly met the moment and she was graceful, she exhibited a grace towards him that he didn't deserve. I think that...
Wait a minute. You were just talking about not being divisive, about unifying. Not even a sentence ago. The hypocrisy These people are all about posturing. They'll say one thing and then immediately in the other sentence, they contradict themselves. How can you even talk about unity when you're using rhetoric that purposely divides people? He doesn't deserve grace. What does he deserve then? What do you suggest, that he just be taken out back and, treated like old Yeller? By the way, I'm just trying to crack a joke here, okay? If you're in one of the intelligence agencies, please don't take this seriously. I voted for the guy. I'm just trying to crack a joke here as far as like, what would she suggest be done to him? And that's likely what she would like done. Let's be real. There are several leftists out there who are posting how they're looking for new people to take on that assignment. It's kind of crazy when you think about it, that you're just openly saying that, which is, by the way, a crime. That's why I disavow it.
It was very powerful that she spoke to young people and explained to them that even though she didn't shatter the ceiling, please don't think that you can't do that. Yeah. And I think that message of hope was really important. But I also think it was very important that she said while she conceded the election, she did not concede the fight that fueled her campaign. Yeah. And that's a fight for democracy.
There's no fight to fuel her campaign. It was barely any fight to begin with. And there's no fight to save democracy, because Democrats have shown that they're as anti-democratic as you can be by installing her as a leader, doing away with the will of 8 million of their voters who chose Joe Biden during their primaries, and just the way that they've been carrying themselves with basically a puppet for president who is cognitively incapable of holding that office and has just been sitting there basically like a rotting corpse in Weekend at Bernie's, and everybody pretending like it's okay. Hey, we're all distracted by the election while this old man, like, who's running the country? Please tell me. That's not democratic. I'm sorry. There's absolutely nothing about it. Also, another example of why the Democrat Party isn't democratic and why they should always be called Democrat instead of Democratic Party. Just remember 2016, what happened in the primaries? Debbie Wasserman Schultz discussing how Hillary Clinton was the chosen one and how they had to do everything possible to cut Bernie's steam. And they did. They ended up cutting Bernie's steam and hurting his campaign considerably, to the point where he wasn't able to, continue in the manner in which he was continuing, which he was going up in the polls. He was doing very well in the debates. So you tell me what's democratic about that. I'll wait.
I do think that in this post-mortem that needs to happen with Democrats, they need to think about, why wasn't she given more lead time? Why didn't Biden give her 6 months or a year to run? But there's bigger pictures. That's a micro. There are some macro issues here. The fact that the nation elected somebody like Donald Trump, who even people who voted for him, I talked to so many of these people, will say, I don't like him. I don't like the things he says, but I felt like my life was better under him. I think that a lot of Democrats missed the moment. They were looking at the micro and not the macro.
Do you think the Republicans missed the moment? What about a postmortem on the Republican Party, which is the Trump Party right now?
They just swept, though. I mean, I've been talking about what I'd like to see from the Republican Party.
They won, but they're morally bankrupt.
But America just gave them. So let me just make my point here. So,
bro, these women in The View, especially Sunny, like, she is so triggered right now. Having to hear that your party has to go and do a post-mortem and reflect on the mistakes that your party made. And trust me, your party made so many mistakes. The greatest sign of that, the literal referendum on your party. Losing Senate seats, losing the presidency, losing congressional seats, majority in the Senate and in Congress. There's no bigger referendum than just getting completely annihilated. Trump being the first Republican president in decades to win the popular vote, it's evident. People don't like the direction the Democrats are going. And yes, you have to do a postmortem whether you win or lose. You don't even have to bring that up. The View is perhaps the most brain dead show ever. It's just outlandish, badly thought out statements for applause breaks. Honestly, I don't even know what the cultural value of the show is, if it has any, if anybody even takes any of these hosts seriously. I remember growing up that the hottest thing about The View was who Rosie O'Donnell was screaming at and getting into it with Elizabeth Hasselbeck. And, back in the day, you used to think, oh, wow, Rosie's really laying it into Elizabeth. Now, in retrospect, I'm like, wait a minute, Elizabeth was right the whole time. It's crazy when you reflect on moments like that and realize just how much the media has warped our perception of truth and right and wrong this entire time. And I think that for a lot of people, myself included, it's hard to not be resentful towards these networks for how disingenuous and against the interests of the American people they've been for literally decades.
So you have people talking about, well, how did he win Michigan? Because Democrats are saying, oh, she should have talked more about Gaza. No, union halls were empty. Dearborn went for Donald Trump. This is not about a micro issue like Gaza. It's people saying the cost of living is too high. The wages are too low. My life felt better under him. And I know what we'll say. Well, Goldman Sachs says the economy will do better under her. The analysts at UPenn and Wharton.
Well, we'll see.
Nobody who is struggling to make ends meet at the table, like how am I going to pay this bill, cares what Wharton professors say about the economy.
With misinformation and disinformation.
And just one more thing I want to say.
Sonny again chiming in with an L. They were bombarded with misinformation and disinformation. I mean, we've already seen who the greatest purveyors of misinformation are. It's you, ABC. Just look at that debate. All you got to do, any reasonable person would sit there, watch that debate, and just see how utterly dishonest your network is. And you're super dishonest as well. You're clearly there to defend this person, to defend this point of view, to push forward your political agenda. You present yourselves as this unbiased body, right? So that you can come here and discuss these ideas, these political ideas and current events in an unbiased manner. But the true dynamic of the show is you have 5 people sitting on it. 4 of them are supposed to be liberal leftists. 1 of them is supposed to be more conservative. The more conservative one is siding with the liberal leftists the entire time. So all you have is basically the equivalent of a Twitter echo chamber. You just have 4 ladies who are just constantly rubbing each other's clits so that they can feel good about how morally righteous they are.
One more thing I want to say. This issue of abortion, which I hope we can unpack more, there are a lot of women who cared about abortion, but they were in states like Pennsylvania where they don't have an ultra-restrictive abortion law. They were voting more because they're like pocketbook issues matter more than if a woman in Alabama is able to get an abortion.
But they're going to do worse under a Trump administration.
But
the only people that are going to do well are the millionaires and the billionaires.
And finally, we talk a lot about these different demographics and these assumptions of where they're going to go. Latinos in Texas, a district that's 97% Latino, went 75 percentage points for Donald Trump. Why?
Misogyny.
It's on the border.
It's
the border
misogyny.
crisis is on their doorstep.
And
they were begging people to care about it for years.
Misogyny
We need to take some lessons.
That's what that was.
The lessons are not
knock,
misogyny,
knock.
sexism.
Who's there? Oh my gosh, it's
Please keep saying this. You're just going to further alienate people like myself. I come from a Latino background. I'm from Brazil. I'm considered Latino, even though in Brazil we don't consider ourselves Latino. I didn't vote for Trump because I don't want a female leader. In fact, in 2016, I voted for Jill Stein. I voted for a woman. Did I want her to be president? Yeah, sure. Did I think that she had a chance? Hell no. Could I vote for Hillary Clinton? Hell no. She's just as bad as Kamala. It has nothing to do with sexism and misogyny. It just has to do with the fact that she's an awful candidate. To this day, nobody can tell you one of her positions. Nobody can tell you a single one of her accomplishments. Nobody can pin down who this person is. And here we have a guy, Donald Trump, who not only do we know who he is, we also know how he governs. And on top of that, we know his policies. They're clear as day. He's been talking about it for the last decade. That's why the narratives that the Democrats try to craft around him, of him being Hitler, of him being a fascist leader, it didn't ring true because guess what? We've lived through a Trump presidency, and we know that he didn't do that. He's not going to do it. And also, there's no way for him to do it because we have the balance of power with Congress, the Senate, and the justices. All that being said, it's more evident than ever why the Democrats lost. Because they're arrogant as fuck. Because they think that they know better than the American people. Because we're the bad guys for voting for the person that we thought was the better candidate. Based on our personal experiences, going out grocery shopping, home shopping, car shopping, knowing that we're not being able to afford day-to-day purchases. It's getting harder and harder to be able to do that because the economy is failing, because we have weak leadership. Seeing our money just get shelled out to Ukraine and to other proxy wars that are being fought while our own people here are suffering, that's not what we want. And that's what this administration represents. And Sonny herself asked Kamala, is there anything you would have done differently than Biden? Nothing at all, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But that was likely the greatest soundbite to come out in this entire campaign. And in my opinion, that's the thing that truly sunk Kamala. Sonny, the same person who's having an absolute meltdown here and is blaming Latino men, for voting for Trump in large numbers should blame herself, because she's the one who gave Trump the greatest ammunition to keep his campaign running and to effectively win the White House by basically inexorably tying her to Biden's failed policies. Anyway, other networks like MSNBC are blaming white men. They're blaming white women. They're looking for everybody else to blame except themselves. The reality of the situation, the Democrat Party can only blame themselves. They're the ones who fucked up. They chose a bad candidate. They lost the trust within their own party because they removed this one candidate that had been duly elected through their primary system. I mean, they completely, in the process of doing that, completely discredited their primary system. How is anybody going to go vote in good conscience in a Democrat Party primary, knowing that at the end of the day, if they don't like the candidate, they'll just flip it around on you and put whoever they want up there? What does that say about this party and the way that they treat their voters and the people who are volunteering for them, the door knockers? Like, what does it say? It says that they don't respect you as a member of their party. They see you as an object to be used so they can get into power, and while in power, further extend their power. They're tyrants. That's really what they are. And they keep revealing it over and over and over again. And the only people who don't notice this are people who are willingly looking away or just caught up with their own lives and can't really keep up with politics.
Democrats need to be mature, and they need to be honest. And they need to say, yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men. Right. It's misogyny from black men, things we've all been talking about, who do not want a woman leading them. Might be race issues with Hispanics. They don't want a black woman as president of the United States. You know, the Democratic Party, I've always found, when you're sitting around talking, they love to just sort of balkanize everybody into these separate groups and say, oh, white people don't like women and black people. No, it is time for the Democrats to say, okay, and you and I have talked about this before, a lot of Hispanic voters have problems with black candidates.
Right.
A lot
and
of,
with other Hispanics. You got some that don't like each other. And some of the most misogynist things I've heard going on this Get Out the Vote tour came from black men. I mean, misogynist things. So you're absolutely right. It's not simplistic. And we've got to have real honest conversations about it.
Real honest conversations.
Who are they trying to appeal to? Seriously, who do they think that they're going to convert over to their cause by calling them racists, sexists, misogynists, just laying out every ist in the book? You think that the Latino vote that you lost, you think that the black vote that you lost, you think that they're looking at this and they're thinking, oh, yes, those guys that hate me, that think I'm an awful person, let me go work with them. I mean, if this is a cocktail party, that would be the last group you would walk to. In fact, you'd be on the other side of the room laughing it up with your friends and looking at them and being like, oh man, those guys are such losers. That's literally what the country has turned into. It's turned into just the Zoomer bros and everybody else who likes to have fun over on the Republican side. And you got the Democrats on the other side just pointing their fingers at everybody, including themselves, saying, you're racist, you're bad, I'm better than you. And that, like, and we're looking over there and we're like, yeah, those people are crazy. Maybe don't let them near the alcohol, because they seem very volatile.
We are about to enter a political period that will have consequences for the rest of our lives. We cannot give up. We now find ourselves in a time in history that has precedent, and we find ourselves, I believe, in a time where there are, let's say, peers in history of mass movements of people that mobilize to protect one another in times of fascism and authoritarianism. And this is the era that we are poised to enter. Donald Trump has talked about turning the military on U.S. citizens that he deems his domestic political enemies. Authoritarians and people that he affiliates closely with and strongmen abroad, in regimes like that, it is not uncommon to jail political dissidents or legislative opponents. This is the world that we very realistically may be entering.
Does AOC remember that 4 years ago, Donald Trump was literally the president, and then he left, and then he came back? Do all the Democrats have collective amnesia that they just can't remember that this man was already in office and he wasn't a fascist? Literally nothing happened outside of just a whole bunch of hoaxes and fraud judicial cases and investigations and the Mueller report, blah, blah, all this shit, all this rabble-rousing and just reality television levels of governing. They were primarily brought on by the Democrats. All the drama was usually the Democrats. Yes, Trump says some dumb shit. He said that's what he's known for. That's what he does. The man was in the WWE. He was in reality shows. That's what he does. Okay, he says inflammatory dumb shit. Does he act on it? Does he actually press the button? Hell no. This dude went out, talked about blowing up North Korea and didn't blow it up. He, in fact, was the first president to ever go out and meet the leader of North Korea and negotiate peace with the dude. Show me one Democrat that's done anything similar. It's just crazy to me. They keep spewing this rhetoric. They keep talking about how this man is Hitler. And yet, like Chuck Schumer, they'll sit right next to him during a dinner, a fundraiser, and laugh at his jokes. They'll call this man Hitler and then concede and say, we're going to work together to get Hitler into power? I mean, make me understand it. Kamala Harris is going to be the one who's going to have to certify the election. She's one of like 3 or 4 vice presidents who have to certify the election that they lost, giving the presidency to their opponent. One of less than a handful, I think, if I remember correctly. And she's going to do that to Hitler? The guy that just a couple of weeks ago she was calling Hitler a fascist. She's just going to do that? How can you in good conscience do that if you know that this guy is Hitlerian? If you know that this guy is a fascist, if he's going to destroy democracy, how can you do that? The level of cognitive dissonance between the message that Democrats are putting out there versus the reality of how the situation is actually playing out, it's two different worlds. And they keep stoking up this fear mongering. It's just constant. They keep stoking up fear because they want to hold you by the balls with a vice, and they want to tighten that vice because they want to pressure you to go out and vote for them in the next election in 2 years from now and then in 4 years from now. That's what they're looking at already. Yes, I know Sonny Hostin was having a meltdown over postmortem, but the Democrats, as failed of a party as they are, they're not just unbelievably dumb, okay? There has to be some brains in there, okay? And I'm sure that they're sitting and doing the most basic thing possible. They're sitting together, having a meeting, and trying to figure out how they can win back seats in the House and then in the Senate, and then work their way back into hopefully getting the executive. And I got to tell you that this current strategy of blaming Americans, of calling people like myself who have voted Democrat my entire life, and the only times that I didn't want to vote Democrat, I literally abstained from the election or voted third party in an effort to take part in the civic duty, but not try to endorse a candidate that didn't go with my values. You're calling me racist and sexist and I'm an awful person now. That makes me hate you. That makes me never want to associate with you again. And everybody knows, folks, that the two strongest emotions that human beings feel are fear and hate. There's a reason why Kamala Harris's entire campaign was about how awful Donald Trump is, because she wanted to prime you to be scared and go vote. She wanted to prime you to be hateful of him and go vote. Those are the two of the most powerful and motivating emotions, and they're doing a great job turning one of those against themselves in a way that, I don't know, it could end up taking maybe even 2 or 3 election cycles before they're able to turn things back around on the executive. Because I'm looking at Trump. He's got 1 more term. He's got J.D. Vance as his vice. That dude is solid. You listen to that dude talk, man, he's as presidential, as relaxed as they come. He's a former military serviceman. He has a very interesting background story. He didn't come from a rich background. He didn't have everything handed to him. He worked his butt off to get where he is. I think that's as American of a story as it can get. I think that has great appeal with a lot of people. So I mean, the Democrats are seriously setting themselves up for defeat. Maybe not even getting the executive for the next 12 years. Who the hell knows? Just like, be normal. Be normal. Be like a person that you would want to talk to at a cocktail party. You know, be the kind of person that you would want to hang out with. Like, just be normal. Anyway, folks, that's that. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. I love you. Peace.